I would like to rise to reply to the contributions made in this place to the Greens Bill, the Public Works and Procurement Amendment Workers' Compensation Nominal Insurer Bill 2020, and I would like to acknowledge the contributions from the member for Ku-ring-gai, Canterbury's, Cessnock, Mulgoa, Goulburn, Terrigal and Heathcote, and thank them for their contributions to this debate. Unfortunately, in the contributions that we've heard from the government, there has been no real clear indication about how we're dealing with what is the current disaster that is going on. I absolutely hear and I acknowledge the comments from the member for Heathcote just then in relation to, just as he concluded his remarks, saying that there is already a review being undertaken, an independent review being undertaken, and obviously there is a lot more that we need to solve about the iCare disaster than just this one issue. But the reason, as I articulated when I first introduced the bill into this place, and my colleague David Shoebridge when he introduced the bill into the upper house, and let's be clear, this bill has already passed the upper house, which is why we are considering it today. My colleague David Shoebridge was very, very clear that this is an urgent need, because the kind of rorts that we've been seeing happening in iCare can continue to happen while this review takes place. So while there is absolutely a need for an independent review, and while I acknowledge that there is still indeed an upper house inquiry going into this issue of iCare and the completely disastrous management of this workers' compensation scheme, it's very important that we remember in that context that the issue that we are dealing with in this bill is the issue of tenders. We are dealing with a loophole that exempts iCare from normal integrity rules that apply to public sector tenders. The consequences here have been that the misuse of immense amount of funds has occurred and the failure of care for tens of thousands of injured workers who got sick or who were injured on the job. So I appreciate that the government might be saying, well, there's a review over here and there's an inquiry over here. But what we're doing with this bill, and the reason why my colleague David Shoebridge has brought this bill, is because there is an urgent need to stop the rorts right now. And I noticed the member for Ku-ring-gai, when he was discussing the need, recognising the need that the government identifies that there it's important to have a root and branch examination. I just wonder how much of an examination do we actually need? And I'll just say, remembering the Four Corners program, I appreciate it was a little while ago now and things move quickly in the time of politics, but let's just remember that the Four Corners program that provided an expose into the complete disastrous mismanagement of iCare reported on an $80 million wage theft from 52,000 injured workers, while senior executives were paid an average of $660,000. $660,000 was the average pay for executives in iCare. We saw the reporting of extreme mismanagement. We saw a complete failure of this scheme and a complete desire to want to sweep all of this under the rug. Now, in relation to this, what we know is that iCare is there to be serving the interests of injured workers. That is not happening. And as the member for Ku-ring-gai knows, and I note that in his comments, he referred to the fact, it's important to recognise that all the money in this fund is for injured workers. And so any money that's going at a $660,000 salary to an executive in iCare is not going to injured workers. Now, the member for Ku-ring-gai said we must allow the review to do its job. Absolutely, absolutely. But the question I ask is, if we were having a review, as we've just been discussing, into the response to bushfire legislation in this state, as we have been doing, if we're having an inquiry into the response of bushfire responses in this state, would we ask all of the RFS and all of the fire brigade to take a pause on actually putting out fires while we allowed that review to be conducted? Or simply would we say, actually, there's probably some urgent need to keep doing what we're doing to try and keep people safe, to try and do what is in the interests of our community while we conduct this review and change? And this is exactly the government's type of excuse for why they're not supporting this piece of legislation. Not because there's no excuse to say there's a review going on, there's an inquiry going on, because in actual fact, both those things are happening. We absolutely acknowledge that in the Greens. However, we also acknowledge that the kind of rorts that have been happening, where people have been handing out money to family members and to mates, money that should have been going to injured workers, There is nothing stopping that continuing to happen right now, because as it stands, iCare is covered by a loophole that means that they do not have to do or meet any of the normal standards. I hate using the phrase pub test, but come on, none of this meets the pub test. In relation to the idea, they don't even have any requirement to meet these kind of scrutinies on their tender processes, and that's why they can get away with handing money to mates and to family members, and they can still do that right now. So if the Treasurer is happy with the idea of overseeing a body and being responsible for a body that continues to be able to rort the system unchecked, can I just put the government on notice? And I put the Treasurer on notice. Because what the Greens have done today is we have offered the Treasurer a way out of being responsible for any more dodgy rorts delivered by iCare between now and when that review is handed down and when those recommendations are implemented. But the Treasurer and the New South Wales government, the Liberal National Government, is seeking to hide behind the review. Well, let's put this date down on the table. Let's put the 19th of November, and I know my colleague, Greens MP David Shoebridge, is in the chamber, and I know he has a good and long memory. Let's put down the date of 19th of November 2020 in our diaries. And then let's look at the date some point in the future where a review will recommend that we make this change that is in this piece of legislation today. And then let's look at the date of when they finally, in the government, implement that recommendation at some point further into the future. And from today, on the 19th of November 2020, until that date, some point in the future, months, years down the track, where the government finally acts, let us do a calculation on finding out how many rorts have taken place and how much more money that should have been going to injured workers has actually been handed over to the executives' mates and families from iCare. And that will be a figure that will sit exactly in the responsibility of the Treasurer, and that will sit as a shame on the Treasurer. I think it is very important, and I want to acknowledge the contribution from the member for Canterbury last week and recognise that her colleague Daniel Mookie in the other place has been working closely with the Greens in relation to this, and also Unions New South Wales and many, many advocates for injured workers. As a member for Canterbury put it so very simply, basically by the government rejecting this bill and not supporting this Greens bill, you are voting for these rorts to continue. You are basically saying that you're okay with these rorts continuing into some point in the future, and that is surely a very, very concerning fact. Knowing what we know about the appalling tender processes and how mates and their related corporations have received preferential access to iCare tenders, knowing what we know now, doing nothing would be criminal. But instead, we are sitting here in this chamber right now, giving the Treasurer an opportunity, and I note that he hasn't come down here, he hasn't engaged with this debate. There's some discussion about, oh, this sits within the Minister for Finance, I don't have to worry about it. Palm it off to some unaccountable upper house MP that used to be down here, that's then up there, sitting there on the government benches, enjoying himself on the idea of being the Minister for Finance up there. He's hidden up there, and then what happens? The Treasurer pretends this is not his responsibility. Well, I say to the Treasurer, this is clearly your responsibility. This is clearly your problem, and this is clearly something that you need to fix. We are giving you an out today to be able to support this piece of legislation. It is absolutely clear. It is absolutely clear that it is needed. No one on the other side denied that this change, or tried to deny that this change was needed. Simply all we heard was there's a review already going on. So what we're in a sense voting for, if the government votes against this piece of legislation today, what in a sense they're doing, as the member for Canterbury said, is they're voting for these rorts to continue. And so from the 19th of November 2020 on this day to whatever day in the future that it's implemented, may all of that money that is rorted, that should have been going into the hands to support and help injured workers in this state, instead going into the coffers of the wealthy executives that are running iCare and taking $660,000 executive salaries, while injured workers are doing it tough and being treated appallingly by this system and by this process. Let that all sit on the Treasurer's head, because it is important to recognise that today the government had the chance to be able to support this Greens bill, the bill that has been brought down from the other place, from the Legislative Council, and it is absolutely clear that more could be done to be able to make sure that these rorts stop now that isn't being done. I want to end by offering the Greens and no doubt many members in this place that spoke in favour of this bill, our solidarity and support to all of the injured workers who have been impacted by the rorts that have taken place. We know that this system is broken. I, for one, as the member for Newtown, have had many people contact our office when the Four Corners story came out, telling us of their appalling situations that occurred as a result of the mistreatment of iCare, of their mistreatment by iCare in the process. Now, we know that it is supposed to be there to be able to support injured workers. We know that if someone is injured at work, it has an impact not just on their physical health, but on their mental health and their ability to participate freely in society. The idea that we would see executive rorts and the kind of rorts that we have seen happening through this process at a time, or through a process that is supposed to be there to support injured workers, is yet another example of how out of touch this Liberal National Government is when it comes to caring for people. So can I just say to all of those people, and I know my Greens colleague David Shoebridge is in the chamber, and I know that he is absolutely committed to the idea of caring for and being compassionate towards the people that are impacted by this scheme. It is them that should be front and centre of this. It is absolutely disgraceful the way that the government tries to hide behind review processes and other things and forget that there's actually people involved in this scenario. I commend the bill to the House, and I would urge those members on the other side who know the impacts that this is having on their local communities to really think hard before they vote against this bill and vote for these rorts to continue.